until all the alcohol is gone. Then first, and also, that's it for that. Okay, also a big thanks to our sponsor, Anchor. As you know, Anchor, thank you to our hosts. Everyone in Anchor, please raise your hands. Wow, y'all here deep. Okay, thank you for hosting us. They have really good hosting services. I am witness to it. Raise your hand if I try to sell you Anchor services before. Okay, yeah, 2 hands.
I'll work you try to sell it to me.
Grab another beer. Okay, Anchor just moved here today. They're moving up like Jefferson's, as you can see. Really big office. Also, Re-Interactive, kick-ass Ruby on Rails developers. Ruby on Rails, could you raise your hands? I mean, Re-Interactive, raise your hands. See? They know what they're doing, don't worry. It's just one person here today. It's not just a one-person company, okay?
They work remotely.
Yeah, they work remotely. They do it right. It's a new age, guys. Okay, Australian Web Awards, also to go over a little more housekeeping. Australian Web Awards are a showcase of outstanding work in web designers and developers. Submission for the awards. Tony, where are you? Tony, there you are. Tony, just to let you know. Okay, and any other agency, Creo, and all the rest of you guys in here. So please submit any of your applicants or anything to for them. Check out the website, speak to Jess. Jess, please raise your hand. There you are, Jess. And also, AWIA is always looking for members. AWIA represents everyone within the web industry. So either if you're a developer, a system admin, business, any retail business, anything in interest within the web industry, AWIA should join. It's very inexpensive to do. Its membership is only $20 a year for students, $50 for individuals, and $150 for businesses. I was a part of other organizations, it was a lot more expensive than that, but you get a lot more out of it through AWIA. There are a stack of meetup groups connected to Port80. Okay, Ruby on Rails, Swag, Sydney, Sydney PHP, Zen Framework, Sydney Mobile Development, DevOps, Speed Networking, OnZackers. Speak to the people on screen for further of these events and check out the meetup page for each of these events. Also, hiring. Anchor is looking for system admin and customer service representatives. Speak to Jess, too much alcohol. Jess and Bart. Bart, where are you? There you go. And also, Re-Interactive is always looking for talented Ruby on Rails developers. Speak to Chloe for further details. Pizza is going to come in about an hour. Okay, so y'all keep drinking. Presentations for more drinks, food, networking later. Please, everyone. We're here to network. We're here to talk. So I'm stop reading. We're here to talk. We're here to network with each other, help each other out. It's about the web industry. It's about helping each other out. It's not about selling. So no selling is allowed. Yes, I said that. Believe it or not, I said that. No selling is allowed. Talk, network, help each other out. Talk about the industry, your pain points and things, and we'll go to the next thing. Now I'm going to hand it over to Ben and Daniel for the presentations. Let me do this, please. Cdn, the choice is yours, but what are you really looking for?
Woo! That was pretty cool, Charles.
Great advertisement.
Let's 2 seconds here.
There we go, we're good to go. All right, welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having us. It's a good turnout. I'd like to firstly start by congratulating Bart and his team for one, successfully moving in today, but also just to congratulate you on having your office, your main space, and your new home. So I think that in itself deserves a round of applause. It's a great achievement. So just to introduce myself, I'm Ben Cook. I always say Ben Cook because most people think when I'm in Australia I actually call Glenn for some reason, so I always like to say it's Ben. And I've got with me Daniel. Just so we can understand the audience a little more, I just want people to kind of raise their hands. Who here is in a kind of a DevOps type role? Any DevOps guys in the room? A couple guys? Any infrastructure guys in the room? Yep. A few sysadmin guys? Any in sales and marketing? Any running their own business? All right, very good. So that allows us, I guess, just to understand a little bit more about where we're going. If you haven't figured it out, my role within Squixa is that of Chief Customer Officer. And so I look after, I guess, our customers, how we go to market, our sales and marketing. And Daniel, our co-founder and CTO, is on the technical side. So any technical questions that get thrown to us, I'm going to offload those. Pun to Daniel. So all good. So with that, we'll get started. Who here has heard of the term CDN and knows what a CDN is? It's good. So CDN itself stands for Content Delivery Network. And so we talk a lot about content delivery networks in the space that we play, and why in itself would customers, you guys, some people that you're dealing with, why would they be looking for a CDN? So obviously there's a few factors that go into why you would want to be in the market looking for a content delivery network. And for those of you that can read, I'm sure you can, they will be things like speed, CDNs in themselves, do some research, improve the speed of the site, crash resistance. So again, the more points of presence that you've got, the more load you're able to distribute across the CDN, and it protects your back-end infrastructure. All good. Improve the user experience. Again, when you flick across to what the marketing strategies are for why you'd want a CDN, we talk a lot about user experience, improving speed for those users, and as itself start to lead towards things like conversion rate discussions, and then things like improvement in SEO. And again, when you start talking about web pages and speed for web pages, it's a pretty known fact that Google itself takes speed of websites into account from an SEO perspective. All good? Make sense?
Yes.
Yep. All right. So some questions that you then may want to ask yourself if you're in the process of looking at CDNs. So what sort of content are you serving and to whom? Okay, so there are a couple of different flavors of CDNs that you might get, and where I guess our background and what we're looking at is things around static objects, small objects, and those sorts of things. You can also get streaming and what CDNs are doing in this kind of streaming space. So it's important to know the context for which you're actually going to market to look for CDN. How are you actually going to measure performance? You'll find, if you're in discussions with CDN players, that they will have a multitude of ways in which that they want to sell to you. And so, how are you actually going to measure the performance that you're going to get from the CDN, based on the reasons why you want a CDN in the first place, is quite important. So, for most people that then start to do some research, it's interesting to see what sort of questions people come out with in terms of, I guess, their business case for reasons why they're going to choose a CDN, what the criteria is, what the priority of that kind of criteria is, and as to why they want to measure performance. Does the provider charge for bursting overages? So again, typically when you're starting to look at content delivery networks, they may be based on how much throughput you're going to have, how much data you're going to move, and usually they will ask you to kind of predict what that's going to be. And then when they want you to write a contract for what sort of traffic volumes you're going to do, they will then start to say, well, based on that contract, you can go up to X, but what does it mean if you go over X, or X plus 1, X plus 2? So in that context, contractually, it's quite interesting to see how they want to play with things like bursting overages, and when you start serving more of what you're doing, how they're going to essentially penalise you. And then you come down to service and support. There's typically around about 20 plus CDNs in market. A lot of those guys don't have feet on the ground here, and so they will then have different support offerings. So again, when stuff happens, and obviously stuff never goes wrong in a technical environment, so we all know that. But when it does, how are you going to fix that stuff? Right? I talk a lot about stuff. I'm in sales and marketing. Most of the stuff is just stuff. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, stuff.
Yeah. Dad knows what the stuff is that we do. I just call it stuff. All right. So then they come to baffle you, right? CDNs. One thing about this industry, we love a 3-letter acronym. So what do CDN providers say? Well, they will come to you with their own sales messages. Those sales messages will say, we have the best CDN because we have the best peer-to-peer networking across our POPs. Who understands what a POP is? Yep. Point of presence. So because we've got all these POPs and we're able to share information across these POPs, we have the best CDN. This one's always important for some people. We have the cheapest CDN. Right? So again, always depends on I guess where you're going, what you're looking for in market. It looks at obviously the cost. There's always a business case for me to write amongst however much spend it is, whether it's $10 or whether it's 10 grand. You always got to put a business case together for somebody. Someone's pocket's got to come out. So cost obviously is a variable factor. And then you've got the super pops, which I thought was a bit of an ice cream actually when I came on board. But some will say, well, we've got these kind of super pops. So as a result, we've got the best CDN. Dan, what's a super pop?
Some CDNs have got lots of nodes spread out inside individual ISPs. So they've got some Cdn Optus, Telstra, TVG. Some of the newer CDNs have got these kind of what we call super pops, where they say we've got a point of presence in Sydney, and maybe we've got one in Melbourne, and everybody, all of the traffic comes to this one place rather than going out to the individual nodes out of the network.
Make sense? Yeah?
I'm in the Crown department, darling. I don't know what it says.
And then they say, well, we've got the most pops on a global basis. So as a result, we can offload more traffic, more pops. And so because we've got more than anybody else, and you'll usually find it's probably a male telling you this, because if we've got more is better. And as a result, their CDN will be better, right? Dan, what does more pops do for us?
So the intention of having more pops means that when I'm browsing at home, I can get parts of the website by staying completely inside my ISP. So at home I use TPG, and the intention of that would be that the CDN would have parts of my website sitting inside TPG. So when I need to load a page, I don't need to go onto the big internet. I can stay inside my ISP, which should make things faster.
Will make sense? Yep. Is there any downside to having more pops?
There's trade-offs in all of these things. When, if let's say I have a CDN with 100 different computers scattered around all of the different ISPs in Australia, the whole point of having the CDN is making sure that the files that I want to download are on that computer. And when I've got 100 of these things, I have to have 100 different places with a copy of that file. When I have a super pop, I only need like one place to have a copy of that file. So the chances that the file I want would be inside the super pop are higher rather than in something with a very highly distributed network.
Good. And then some will say, we have the best pops because our infrastructure is based on solid state, so we can process faster. So everyone knows and thinks nowadays that solid state is better, so everyone goes, well, we've got the newest infrastructure, newest solid state drives, we process stuff a lot faster, and as a result, we have the best CDN. Okay? Good.
Who's saying that?
Huh?
Who's saying that?
All right, are there any other important considerations in this piece? Of course there are, right? You will typically get baffled by technology around offload. Okay, so again, depending on where you sit, you find there's conversations that happen in around what marketing are after in terms of speed, site performance, customer conversion, you know, those sorts of things. When you switch across into an IT world, they'll be looking at things like offload. Right? How do we get offload onto a CDN? Dan, offload.
Yeah, so the objective of the CDN is to have these files in a place that's fast for you to retrieve the files from. When I'm browsing at home and I look at a web page and I get files that come from the CDN rather than from the main source where the web application lives, that traffic doesn't need to go back to the web server where all the code is running. And the traffic that doesn't go back is what we call offload. The traffic is being offloaded from the primary source onto the CDN, and the traffic just goes between my computer and the CDN.
And if we were running a marketing burst, does offload play a part in how we can protect our environment?
Yeah, so definitely does. So one of the key success criteria for a CDN is making sure that you can flatten the traffic that's happening back at your application. Often when you when you have a big marketing campaign, back-end servers start to melt down because they're kind of it's not normal for them to receive that much traffic and the systems aren't prepped for it. So trying to remove as much of the workload off the primary source of the web application can make your media events much more effective because you can handle more users.
Good. Performance. So one of the things with a CDN, people go looking for CDNs in the market is because they hear that it provides an additional level of performance for their website, and so they'll go looking for a CDN based on the need for speed, so to speak. Availability is an interesting point. Obviously, when you're moving things onto a technical environment, the availability of that environment, that technology environment, is all important. So again, one of the key questions and considerations when you're starting to look at a CDN, just like you would when you're asking Anchor to host your environments, is making sure that they're available and what their availability is.
So given that Australia has amongst the worst bandwidth in the world, and I know that because I lived in Japan for 5 years, how do you basically propose a CDN where the bandwidth in Australia is like pretty much Mickey Mouse compared to other countries like LimeWire or Akamai? How can you basically cache this in Australia when our pipes are like pieces of spaghetti?
Give you the spin on that.
So,
Sorry to ask the hard question, but that's the reality.
Questions are always good.
yeah, so if I rephrase it in my words, if I've got these small connections around Australia, how do I improve the performance for the end user?
So what kind of cache hit do you have from your CDN versus in the real world? If I'm in Sydney or Melbourne, I try to find something.
Yeah.
Is it in your cache or am I going to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
What is the hit ratio like? And the reality is, do I have enough bandwidth to really facilitate a real world experience that a customer can have?
Yeah.
Given that we have amongst the worst pipes in the world.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, I'll come and talk to you afterwards because my brain just goes into a very deep technical place. Which is kind of scary. I'll come and talk to you about it. It's a very pertinent question.
I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just asking a question.
That's good. Throughput is another important consideration. A lot of people talk about how much, I guess, traffic and volume, their volume of traffic they're trying to squeeze through the pipe. I once likened this to sucking a golf ball through a hose pipe. So if you don't kind of have the right pipe, it's quite a hard thing. So again, one of the considerations is really around throughput. Obviously, cost is a factor. Everyone, as I said, in my world, everyone has a business case to write depending on how much they're going to spend on this stuff, and they all come at various costs. Not only do they come at various costs, but their pricing models are also vastly different. Some can be based on data throughput, some can be based on how often you clear the cache, some can be based on traffic that you move, pages served, etc. And we talked about support. What are you going to do if it all goes wrong? What are you going to do if you want to have a chat with someone about improving things? What are you going to do if there is a security issue that's happening on your site? What are you going to do if you just want to ask some questions, and they could be, I say there's never a dumb question, the only dumb question is the unasked question. If you just want to have some advice with someone about how is this affecting my world, how are you going to get that from a support perspective? All good. And then access. What access do you have to information? What access do you have to the technical environment? What access do you have to go and ask those questions of that support team? And contractually, what do they kind of tie you into? Right? So I guess in our world, these are all becoming important factors into why do I want to choose a CDN? Who here thought that choosing a CDN was easy? It's just one of those things, right? Just go out there, but it's not, let me tell you. So the important considerations when you actually get to all of this is, are you actually choosing a CDN based on waffle, baffle, what the sales guy is going to talk to you about? Is the sales guy going to talk you into a few leading questions and a few leading answers? Or are you actually going to stick to your guns and choose the one that's best for your website? Who here's ever gone out to buy something like a TV and then just got upsold by the sales guy? It kind of always happens, doesn't it? It does. So you know, it's no different in this world. Everyone's going to baffle you with technology that they know more about than you. And which one's right for your users? So again, what happens when you have a user base? Where is that user base? What's that user base looking at? Right, and is the CDN right for them? Because if it isn't, then again it can go wrong. And you don't want this guy to be the guy that's purchasing your stuff. Unless it's no-dos. So the features of CDN. Who's liking the slight walk on wires? So the features of a CDN. So there are lots of features to a CDN. And Dan is quite obviously going to talk through this.
I'll go through these one by one. So push or pull a CDN. There are basically two types of CDN. I've got one where I upload my content onto it. So if I'm running a shop, I can go put my product, I can go and log into the CDN and put my product images onto it, which is the push model. A pull CDN involves me in my online shop using my normal backend, but the CDN will come and basically slurp up all of the product images and put them onto the network without any kind of workflow change happening inside the content management process. Cache clearing is one of the key things about content delivery networks. So let's say, for example, I put the wrong product image onto a product page. When these things get out into the internet, if you need to go and correct mistakes, you need techniques to be able to get out into the CDN and to remove things, which is about going and clearing things out of the CDNs themselves. Cdn configuration and management is often one of the hardest components of buying CDN, or at least establishing how a CDN works with your website. Some CDNs require you to go and change your code or change the way that your servers are set up in order for them to work, and others don't. So others have a high kind of entry point where you need to get your people skilled, you need to go and possibly make changes in the installation process to make the CDN work as good as it should. Whereas others have got techniques inside them that mean that the burden on setup is much lower. Ssl encryption is obviously very important. So for most places who want to transact online are going to do it with security turned on. When CDNs look at SSL, they want to handle SSL differently to a normal web server setup, and you need to talk to your CDN provider about how we're going to do security and what additional costs is having security on my site going to cost. I think I've kind of covered change required in the Cdn configuration management. Often, as I said, oftentimes when you install, you need to go. The Cdn company would do some work for you, and you have to go and do work as well. Post support, just excuse the dots in there. Post is in TechSpeak one word. Not all CDNs can run on all websites. So there are some CDNs that just serve images, and there are some CDNs which can serve your whole site, including your HTML. But if you've got an online form, like a checkout form or contact us or something like that, normally a developer would build that using post requests. Not all the CDNs have that capability. And then support, I think Ben covered quite well, and then the cache control headers kind of plays into the change required, a CDN will take product image and logo.gif and keep a copy of it for as long as you tell it to. So you need to tell it how long to keep a copy for. And it's kind of in that setup process where you say, well, logo.gif doesn't change every 5 minutes. It's the same. It's been the same for 2 months, and the CDN can have a copy of that for a month. But the product images, if we make a mistake, we'd like to be able to have that fixed within 5 minutes. So we'll let the product images go for 5 minutes, but the logo will go for a lot longer.
Dan, to ask you a quick question. Things like cache control headers, do we ever see those written poorly or set up poorly in amongst our customer base? I was going to have a plant in the audience, but I thought that was just
yeah, so often there's a disjunct between dev and ops, and the guys who build the site do things that make development easy, but that don't make running the site well easy. And sometimes the developer would say, while I'm developing on my computer, nothing is allowed to be cached. And that means I don't have to keep hitting F5 as I'm writing my code, and I don't have to keep hitting F5 to see my changes. Sometimes these things move out of the development phase and go straight into the live site. And the live sites get set up without having these things set up correctly. And what happens when the website goes live, when you download the logo, the server sends an instruction saying, hey, you're not allowed to keep a copy. Anytime you navigate to the next page, you need to come and download the logo again, which kind of hurts the page performance. So getting those cache control headers set right is very important.
I will take a punt and say, if there is anybody who would like to throw down a technical question at this point, now is your opportunity. Anyone?
Why did you put the dots in post?
Yeah, that's a
very good question. I didn't get it removed.
Slight technical issue we have there. Didn't go through the QA process. We also did throw it in there actually, just as one of those kind of mistakes, see whether anyone pick it up. So good spot. You get a prize. There's a free beer in that too. So, do your customers actually care about what CDN is? I mean, CDNs are cool, right? I mean, they're interesting.
Can I ask a technical question?
Sure.
So a bunch of the hype that I've been hearing is about sort of network optimization for dynamic content and not static content. That their pipes are better, and so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So there's when you serve a website, probably 90%, maybe even more than 90% of the time it takes to build a web page is going back and forth, downloading JavaScript and CSS and pictures and things like that. The initial HTML document is often personalized, so you log in and up the top it says, welcome Daniel, you've got 3 items in your cart, and it's only the back-end code that's able to generate that HTML. So say you're on Magento, Magento knows that I'm logged in, I'm Daniel, and I've got 3 items in my cart, and when I go and hit a product page, it goes and calculates all of the HTML, brings that together. Now when data flows through the CDN, the browser connects to the CDN, and then the CDN goes and connects to your servers. One of the features of some CDNs is that they claim to improve the speed between the CDN and your server, right? Not between, that they all claim to improve the speed between the browser and the CDN, but some of them have special tech that improves the quality of the communication between the CDN POP and the backend itself. When we, there are certainly good network optimization techniques that accelerate the content of that HTML moving from the CDN to the browser, right? When we look at the overall page performance though, these things don't have dramatic impacts on the overall page load time. The overall page load time is spent in a couple of areas. It's in the code that the devs wrote to generate the HTML, then getting that HTML across the wire is generally a very small component. 80% of the page load time is actually getting to CSS, JavaScript, image 1, image 2, image 3, image 4. And when you look at a page load, there's about 100 requests back and forth. So certainly those technologies do work, but what we're really talking about is improving a very, very small percentage of the overall page load time.
We did some calcs and put some numbers up on our blog actually, and I think we came out with a potential benefit for an average page over the internet based on the number of requests that should be going back to your back end versus your versus the CDN. I think we come up with about a 20 millisecond differential, a possible 20 millisecond differential on a page download through using that those dynamic site acceleration.
So when we're talking about 20 milliseconds on a page, an average Aussie shop page takes about 3.5 seconds.
Good. That's with our core infrastructure in Australia. Different any other questions? No? All good? So do your customers actually care? Do customers care about what CDN is being chosen? Who this morning woke up and went, I need to go and buy a CDN today? Come on, who did it? Who did it? So you know, the great thing about technology, customers don't care, right? No one's browsed the page and gone, I wonder which CDN these guys are using. Oh, that'd be interesting to know, right?
So there'll be a few admins you have.
Actually, there's 5 guys inside of Squixa that care. But customers don't, right? You know, at the end of the day, they're focused around the speed and performance of what their website is going to do. And again, I guess what's always interesting, you know, being lived and breathed in the internet space and into the technology era, is that we can spend a vast amount of time patting ourselves on the back for how brilliant our technology is and going out and selling all the features and functions of what technology is and does. But at the end of the day, we're all outcome focused, right? Organisations are outcome focused. Typically, they're based around, you know, what's hitting my bottom line and am I keeping my shareholders happy? So no, customers typically don't care about the CDNs. What do they care about when you're browsing? I'm pretty much guessing when you're browsing a site, you want to know A, it's available, B, it's fast, right? And then probably C, what's the experience like when I'm on that site? Right? Is it nice? Is it good? Is it contextual? Is it graphical? Is it immersive? Is it not? But we did talk about, you know, one, is it available? You go and hit a site and it's not there, right? You want to know why. You're going to leave pretty quickly. And two, if everyone's been in situations where stuff just takes too long to load and rebounds, right? So customers care about, from a CDN perspective, right? It's about how fast it's running and actually is it there, and what sort of experience am I going to have when I'm on there. So we've talked a little bit about availability, and then we start to, I guess, again in our world, we capture a lot of data. We capture a lot of data of what's actually happening. We monitor quite a lot of what's going on in amongst CDNs. We are capturing little pulses of what's going on around the internet and where it's happening around the internet in order to capture that data and run it through our metric system. And so we then start to look at availability and focus around availability of what CDNs are across some well-known CDNs that are in that space. And we then start to look at what the kind of metrics look at for us. Because availability is always important. And Dan, why is availability important?
Well, it's obviously keeping your site on, but if we have a look at what we're looking at here, this chart shows the success rate to download objects from real users at home over their ISP links to the CDN and back. So if we go and let's say I drop a box inside Anchor and I monitor these CDNs, it's going to be much more successful than it is when I monitor from my home in TPG. There's lots of things that can break in between when we go out into the suburbs of Sydney to to deliver content. When we look at these CDNs, some of them are scoring about 98.5% success. So the way this works is we sit down, we download logo.gif, and for this network, we get it about 98% of the time. So 1 in 100 misses. Like it actually fails to download the image. Some of the other ones are much stronger. So this is 100%. We get it every single time. But not any one CDN will give you back your logo every single time you request it.
Silly question, but why?
Yep, good question.
Yeah, so there's lots of things that affect it. So, things like mobile networks make it harder. But there's kind of two components to it. Is the CDN a quality piece of equipment and tech sitting on the network, and problems inside the CDN itself can affect the ability to deliver these things. Then there's also the internet itself, which has actually got lots of failures in it, right? And things like because these measurements are coming off real-world devices. If I'm browsing a site which is taking one of these measurements while I'm on the bus, and I move from 3G tower to 3G tower, that can cause these kinds of problems to occur.
But in the actually, like you say, it's still pretty close to.
Yes.
At the end of the day, if your logo doesn't appear or your pair of shoes doesn't appear on your phone, it's really not the end of the world. You just refresh it there.
Yeah, people do. That's right. Yeah, so there's the point of this is that there's yeah, exactly. There's different levels of quality in CDNs. There's different pricing levels and quality levels.
Does this mean that the artifact didn't download at all, or it just fell back to the original website?
This is a 5-second timer, right, for a 10 kilobyte object.
So I'm just thinking, you're saying
very
someone's
small.
on a checkout in a JavaScript file they've downloaded.
Yeah.
You're saying 1 in 100 people might not be able to make the same transaction.
Yeah, exactly. If your system is dependent on those things, this is the kind of things that you get this anecdotal feedback of, oh, I couldn't check out, or I couldn't log in. Devs go and look at it in their internal network, get perfect. Everything's fine. Don't know what you're talking about, go away. Or customers got a virus, or give you these kinds of answers.
So it can have an impact, if you think about things like, what if it's the price, what if it's the size of it, what if it's the actual image itself, doesn't matter. And you think if there's over 100 calls on that web page alone, that means one of those calls is potentially going astray at any particular time. So availability does have an issue, and when you transpile that across a million users, then you've got to be aware of 5% or 0.5% difference. It does have an impact.
Does that affect
Yeah, so those kinds of things can be suppressed. Not even just from CDN things, but just the characteristics of the internet. Of it generally being a lossy place. But just to make one more point on your checkout issue, when we go and look at a website and how it's built, the first page load often downloads lots of objects for future pages. So oftentimes that big JavaScript file that actually runs the checkout is probably downloaded on the home page. Yeah, so kind of already got it.
So next time you're on a checkout page, right, and it doesn't kind of work, you can't check out, you need to fire an email saying your CDN is crap. Yeah, and we know who to call.
Add it today. Yeah, really.
And performance, right? Again, we talked a bit about availability, but obviously performance is a key metric as well. And Dan.
Yeah, so these are measurements from of the same CDNs. The Squixa one is measured in here. Basically lower is better, and so you can kind of see some of the top brands in Australia versus how the Squixa network compares. So when we look across all of the website's customers, this is what the kind of performance you would get out of the CDN. And again, one page takes 100 of these images, JavaScript files, and things to download, and you basically need to pay this for every one of those 100. So say we're on high winds, we're looking about 70 milliseconds for each one of those 100 requests we do, and it adds up. And this is why web pages, on average, take 3.5 to 5 seconds to load in Australia because of all that constant round tripping.
So what sort of difference could it make from, say, top to bottom, saying that Squixa are 50 milliseconds versus 70? In real terms, what might that mean?
Yeah, so there's, well, I can multiply it to 100 requests, but it kind of gets more complicated than that because I've got channels and multiple concurrent requests. So when we look at CDN itself, it's possible to get kind of 5 to 10% performance improvement, right, from CDN with no other acceleration tech.
Makes sense. Anything else to add?
Sorry, what is Cloudflare using?
Yeah, so Cloudflare have
Can you just repeat the question? Sorry, I didn't hear it back.
in Australia is actually quite poor.
So what about Cloudflare that wasn't in our matrix?
And they do have algorithms. They have, back to the gentleman's point earlier, about they have a thing called Railgun, which is WAN optimization between the CDN and your servers. But again, it's about kind of optimizing these uncacheable requests overall. In the whole picture of the whole page download, it's actually very, very small.
I'll ask another difficult question. Who do you pair with, and what bandwidth who do you pair with from a content perspective, and what bandwidth do you have in pairing? So do you pair with, you're in Global Switch or are you in Akamai? How much bandwidth do you have? Who do you pair with and what capacity?
We should take that offline as a separate Squixa question, maybe.
Well, that's about a capacity performance perspective, so it should be something that people are interested in.
Squixa has a very different strategy to content delivery networks, which can't really compare to any single one of those. So those kinds of questions don't really apply in the Squixa framework.
Well, if I compare to Akamai, and you've got like 50 or 60 milliseconds response time compared to Akamai, where is the content coming from and how much bandwidth do you have to basically complete that request? It's like saying, do I have a freeway or do I have a dirt track?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, we have a completely different strategy towards content delivery networks, and I don't really want to kind of do a full sales pitch on you because
Jared said
I'm an engineer.
We'll take that offline because there's no sales pitch.
That's where that.
We're happy to take that.
But that's where that question. The answer to that question goes. It sounds like very much a sales pitch.
Okay, well, it's not sales. It's like, do you have a freeway or do you have a dirt track? That's the question.
Pretty large.
So really to conclude on our presentation around CDNs, I think it's quite obvious to conclude that all CDNs aren't built equally. There's multiple factors that go into CDN in terms of the decision around tech, the buying decision, the process, measurement, etc., etc. I guess all CDNs perform differently at different times, right? So there's no constant in this. These things kind of move up and down. Again, we're looking at our own metrics across our multiple CDNs, and minute by minute they vary. They vary location by location too. For the ultimate performance, most CDNs will tell you that you need to actually go and change your application and what's being written by the application in order to get the most bang for buck and the most performance out of the CDN. So they will ask you to make a whole bunch of architectural changes, a whole bunch of code changes, and do a whole bunch of things in around your web and web code and the delivery of that HTML into the CDN before the CDN is going to perform better. Right? Sounds like a bit of a cop out to me. Anyone involved in SEO always seems to have this kind of disclaimer that says, we never know what Google's doing, so therefore we're just taking a bit of a punt. Same sort of thing. In a CDN space, you can look at what sort of changes do I have to check, what things do I have to do in order to make my CDN perform better. Any questions on any of this? No? Blake plug. If you want simple, intelligent, brilliant, talk to Dan. So so that's largely a conclusion. Obviously, we'll take the floor to questions. Anyone got any questions? Anybody want to talk about what? Anything? Bob? Any questions?
No questions.
No good? Any good? Talk about cricket. Always talk about cricket. What else? More questions? Difficult questions?
I mean, you don't have to sell yourself here, but obviously you've got an Australian presence. What other alternatives are there for an Australian presence in the CDN space?
Yep. Again, the nature of CDNs means that if there's 20 plus on the market, there's 20 plus available in Australia. You can go to sites like Cdexis.com and they will start to rate throughput, availability, performance, etc. from a CDN perspective. The challenge is always, what's being measured at that particular time, what's Cdexis basing that on, what's their baseline for those sorts of things. Again, what sort of content are you providing, where's your customer base. Again, within Australia, it tends to be, for most Australian organisations that are looking at this stuff, the customer base tends to be in Australia. But for example, we're talking to the education space at the moment. Education space in Australia is a very attractive market in and around Asia. Right, so therefore they get a lot of traffic in those countries. So when they're an Australian organisation, they don't necessarily want to go and look at what's rated best in Australia from the CDNs that are available. They actually want to go and look at what's available in the world.
But to the bulk of Australians here, we're all Australian. Where is the alternatives to you guys?
Yeah, typical names that get thrown out for us, CloudFront, because it's Amazon based. Anyone wants to kind of tick the box, they can tell them CloudFront pretty quickly. Cloudflare, which is based overseas, has a security kind of background. So again, once people get into Cloudflare from a security perspective, it comes with a CDN. Akamai are globally the largest. A report the other day actually said 25% of all internet traffic runs through Akamai servers. So they're our IBM of the world, and as a result, they kind of have an IBM view of the world. So if you start looking at them, there are others: PACnet, CDN77, and various others.
Edgecast, Highwinds, Cachefly, on app. There's probably 15 providers who have local equipment in some form.
And or resellers of that stuff. So some have got kind of strategic relationships reselling someone else's. Within our kind of multi-CDN, we're effectively basing our offering on what those guys are providing in terms of their overall infrastructure. We just have some smarts that kind of samples. Yes.
One of the things I might have missed when I went to the bathroom, but you guys mentioned that the benefits of the CDN on a geolocational basis. For example, like in Australia, if you're in Sydney and you're trying to serve content to Western Australia in Perth, you got about 120, 160 minimum latency. So the CDN really comes out on its own if you have your content distribution like around Australia, because let's face it, Australia's a big continent, and we do have really crap bandwidth. As the gentleman pointed out. So would you guys talk about the CDN, how it's really effective when it comes to geolocation delivery of static files like images, JavaScript, CSS?
Yeah. So I guess the interesting factors in that is your customer base. If your customer base sits in Perth, do you want to be talking to a provider that has a super pop based in Sydney, or do you want to be talking to someone who has 150 pops based around Australia? But some of those may not be as effective in Perth as they are in other areas. Again, if your customer base is based in Perth, where is that? I guess where are those pops? Where are they located? How close are they to end users? And so there's kind of measurements in that, but there's also cost factors in that as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to help you guys out by saying that as a sysadmin, as a web developer myself.
I was going to say I couldn't have said it better. And you're right, we didn't really emphasise.
You guys need to emphasise that, because that is the #1 reason why anyone would go with CDN. It's just to deliver the static images, the static files closer to where the end user is getting it from. That's the only. To me, that's the only reason I'd consider CDN.
I think with a CDN, when more and more stuff becomes video, and it's going to happen, it's like SD now. In the next 2 or 3 years, it'll be HD and then Super HD, like 4K and 8K TV. CDN is super important to be geographically close to the consumer, because the amount of traffic becomes huge. So this gentleman is right. Geographic location becomes super important. You need to get your content as close to the user as possible.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, because availability means, like, at the end of the day, if my server goes down, it doesn't really matter that my image is being served, you know, closer to the person, because it's
It could be in
not gonna-
Tasmania, but who cares,
Exactly,
right?
because
If
no
it
one's
takes
getting
20
the
seconds to load, you
main
don't
portion
care.
of it. So I reckon you guys, like,
So
really in presentation, I think that one of the things that you guys need to emphasize is geolocation.
Geolocation is a strategy for improving performance.
So the question is, how many locations do you have?
I'll get to you, alright? I'll get to you, right?
We'll sort you out.
If I have one location and I was fastest, didn't matter what, it wouldn't matter, right? So it's kind of trying to say we're closer because it's faster.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's about
Bandwidth and location matters, end of the day, right? Especially in this small island.
The cost of traffic is also an interesting point.
Yeah, Australia's like 15.
More traffic that's been served on mobiles. Again, has an interesting effect depending on how much.
So if you do peering in Australia, Australia is 15 times the price of peering in North America. We're like 3 times the price of most goods you buy in Australia, but internet is like 15 times the price.
Yes.
Can you, sort of back to market stuff and not you specifically, can you comment on the sort of trends in sort of pricing, and if I'm going to go negotiate a sort of 2-year deal with some CDN provider, and I kind of want some projections on trajectory on how much I'm be paying per terabyte?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I might hand that one over to our CEO to answer a couple of questions.
Copying out of the commercial question.
Commercial discussion.
It's sort of trending, right? So
yeah, it's definitely trending. And it's trending with a bunch of different players coming to the market, and some of this goes back to what the guy's talking about there in terms of the different types of CDNs there are out there. I mean, you can go and buy a CDN now for free, but what does free really mean in terms of the quality of service you're getting out there? And then you can buy CDNs for 2 cents a gigabyte over in the US, maybe 10 cents a gigabyte here. It really depends on
what is the price today versus what it was, say, 12 months ago in Europe?
It's probably, I split the players into 2. There's Akamai, and then there's everyone else in the pricing scale. Akamai run a really long-term contracts approach. Some of the other guys in the mid-tiers, the Edgecast, the high wings, will run a 12-month contract with me, which is probably a more competitive pricing ratio to the Akamai guys. The Akamai guys will sell you on a really hard, this is, we're the biggest, we're the best, the IBM sale, therefore you can pay more. We've seen them come down somewhat, probably, I'd say 20% over the last 12 to 24 months. The mid-tiers come down probably 25 to 30% over the last 12 to 24 months. And then the bottom dropped out of the market, right, in the really cheap.
To add to that, so the going rate for the market right now for Akamai, depending if you're just a monolith shop out here, it's around about 30 and 50 cents per gig that you transfer inbound and outbound. Any others will negotiate pricing. Don't ask how I know that. We'll see afterwards, but I know all the pricing.
And that will exclude SSL support.
It does exclude SSL support. What they do is hit you on add-ons, everything that you do, and it adds up.
You shouldn't discourage SSL when you talk about location, because terminating your SSL close to the user actually is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. On behalf of Dan and I and Squixa and Stuart as well, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. I see the pizza just arrived, so I'm sure that.
Oh, it did?
Guys, please get involved. Some of y'all look like y'all were bored out of your minds because you didn't understand. Don't worry about it. What you do is add to the event, add to AWIA. Tell us, hit Jess up what you would like to speak on. We have all walks of life within the industry. We have the arts department with New South Wales. We have Fairfax with Atlassian. We have digital media. We have Village. We have a lot of people in here. Give notes on what you want to hear about these events so we can have a talk, have a discussion, and go about what is important to us as individuals in the industry. Eat, be merry, go home.
Yeah.
there's the pizza.